Good morning and welcome to Daily Red Devil for all of your latest Manchester United transfer news and talk. Happy Friday, everyone. The weekend is here, and you know what that means? That means we've got football in 48 hours' time, obviously with Manchester United playing Everton. As always, though, we have got a massive show to bring you guys this morning. Before we jump into that, please do make sure to smash a like on the video, give it the thumbs up, and please do subscribe to the channel, bottom right-hand corner, if this is your first time watching the show. So on the show today, we're going to be talking a little bit about the Varane and Ten Hag fallout. We've had a couple of stories come out this morning, ultimately painting a bit more of a picture of what's actually happened between Varane and Ten Hag. And we'll also obviously be discussing what that means for the future. Does it look like Varane will leave? Lots of stuff to get into on that front. We'll also be talking a little bit about Jim Ratcliffe's massive decision. Obviously, it looks like he will be buying this 25% share. There's lots of different things we need to talk about in that sense. We need to talk about this story about the potential European ban. We need to talk about what he's going to do with Jadon Sancho, what he's going to do with Casemiro, what he's going to do with Varane. So lots of stuff to get into on that front. And we also have some other bits of transfer-related news and stuff as well, which I'll just kind of throw in here and there. But as always, do make sure to get involved in the comment section, everybody. Let me know your thoughts on everything we discuss on today's show. Have your opinion. This is a place where we can all share our thoughts. So do make sure to get involved in the comment section, in the live chat, and let me know your thoughts on everything. Let's start off with this Raphael Varane story then, because obviously this is probably the biggest bit of news of today's show. The headline this morning is, the relationship between Erik ten Hag and Raphael Varane has broken completely. It says a frank exchange of views took place after Varane was dropped for the Manchester derby last month. Varane is unhappy that Johnny Evans has been chosen ahead of him. It's difficult, it is, because when you look at it black and white, Erik ten Hag's the manager. Erik ten Hag is the one who picks the team. It's his choice, okay? It's very difficult because I see both sides to it. I am a little bit confused as to why Varane would start over Johnny Evans, though. You've got somebody who's won 5 Champions Leagues, somebody who's 30 years of age, somebody who was considered one of the best centre-backs in world football not that long ago, versus a 35-year-old who just got relegated with Leicester and was a free agent. I can understand why Varane would be upset about that. Like, just let that sink in for a second. You're being benched by somebody who just got relegated, was 35, and didn't even have a club to go afterwards because Leicester didn't want to keep you. Like, there is obviously something up there with that. I don't know what it is. I don't know. I really, really don't. Are we all really saying that Johnny Evans is better than Varane? Like, surely not. The only kind of argument that I can agree with here whatsoever is that, just double checking, is Johnny Evans left-footed? Let me just double check this. Just want to make sure I get this right before I make this point, because I don't want to... let's have a look. Because somebody told me before that it's because Johnny Evans is left-footed, but I'm not sure if he is left-footed. I just want to double check that. If anybody knows in the comment section... let's say, what footed is Johnny Evans? Because, yeah, I understand if you want a left-sided centre-back and a right-sided centre-back, you know, one who has a left foot. I mean, they're both right-footed. Yeah, so that theory is completely rubbish, so ignore that. I don't get it. I was trying to make an excuse for Erik ten Hag. I was trying to justify why he decided to do that. And somebody had said to me that Johnny Evans was left-footed, and that's why he played, because he wanted him to be the left-sided centre-back. Because we know that Erik ten Hag has this kind of obsession, doesn't he? That he wants a left footer at left-sided centre-back and a right footer at right-sided centre-back. So at the moment, he's got Lindelof, Johnny Evans, Varane, and Maguire. They're all right-footed centre-backs. So he's only got 4 people for the same position. The only left-footed centre-back we had was Martinez, who's obviously injured. So I don't understand it. I really, really don't. Obviously, we have to back the manager. You know, we have to back the manager. Like, we have to, don't we? But as I said to you on the show yesterday, we don't know what's going to happen to Erik ten Hag in the next 10 games. You know, I back Erik ten Hag 100%. I think he's the right man for the job, but there is a big question mark about whether he'll even still be here in January. When you look at the next 10 fixtures, we've got, you know, people like, we play Newcastle, Liverpool, Aston Villa, Chelsea, Bayern Munich, Galatasaray, Everton away. You know, these next 10 fixtures will be the most difficult fixtures of his whole time in the Manchester United managerial position. And I think that I would say it's 50-50, to be completely honest with you. If you wanted my opinion, I would say it's 50-50 whether Erik ten Hag will be here in January. If we were to lose, 7 or 8 of those 10 games out of the Champions League, sitting down in the bottom half of the table, things can change very, very quickly, And with that in mind, you could imagine another manager coming in and then making friends with Evans, making friends with Varane, making friends with Sancho, making friends with Casemiro, and everything kind of goes back to normal again, I'm not saying I want that to happen, but we know what football's like, and we know how executives and business people think in football clubs, right? They think, well, if there's an issue, if the players stop playing for the manager, what's easier? To sack one person, the manager, or to try and sack the whole team and bring in a whole new squad? Like, it's clearly easier to get rid of one manager, isn't it? So I think we have to consider that. Meglaman says Varane hasn't been playing very well. Yeah, I kind of agree with that, to be fair. Paul says he's a class above Evans, but he's made of glass. Yeah, the thing is, right, I get that Varane's injury prone, but he was fit and he was available to play that game against Man City. He was on the bench and we lost 3-0. So you obviously do have to criticise Erik ten Hag somewhat, but would it have really made any difference if Varane had played? Maybe. I mean, we'll never know, will we? I'll say this, right? I want to be fair. I don't think Johnny Evans has been terrible what I've seen of him this season. Do I think he's good enough to play for Manchester United now? No. Was he good enough 10, 15 years ago? I think he was kind of in and around the squad. I don't think he started every single game, did he, under Sir Alex? But yeah, so I don't want to be too critical of Johnny Evans because he has been all right, And let's be honest, when Varane has had an opportunity, you think in that game against Copenhagen, he was absolutely terrible. He was a disgrace. Like, he was so poor, awful. If that was Harry Maguire, he would be getting absolutely slated for that performance he put in against Copenhagen. It was terrible. It was an embarrassment. And I think at least one, if not two, of the goals were a direct result of him just lazily trying to kick the ball out and just kicking it up in the air directly upwards, and then them scoring. So we've got to be fair here in our criticism. It can't just be, oh, Varane's won 5 Champions Leagues, he has to play, blah, blah, blah. He hasn't taken his chances when he's played. And I think that Erik ten Hag is quite a fair manager in the sense that if somebody starts taking their chances, the other person will get dropped, And I don't think anybody in this fan base can complain that Maguire's getting played every single game because he's putting in good performances. And I do like that about Erik ten Hag. He rewards good performances. And people will say, oh, what about Anthony? He plays Anthony. I mean, Anthony's been dropped now, So people can't always go on about these favourites and favouritism because Anthony was his favourite, supposedly. He was his, his 100 million euro signing. He was his star boy, whatever you want to call him. He put in a couple of absolute stinkers and then Erik ten Hag's dropped him. So I think that the criticism is just another way of, trying to create this agenda against Erik ten Hag, to be honest. Paul says, I think Erik ten Hag is trying to get all the big earners out of the club. That's obviously the way it's going. I would actually agree with you there, Paul, to be honest. I mean, he's fallen out of Casemiro. He fell out with Ronaldo. He fell out with Varane. He fell out with De Gea. I mean, is there a coincidence that those are all the players? He fell out with Sancho. The 5 or 6 players that Erik ten Hag's fallen out with or tried to get rid of are the ones that are on 300 to 350 grand a week, Obviously, there's Rashford, but I think Rashford's kind of different. He was on about 200 and it's just gone up to 250. He's still not in that mega bracket, and Rashford is still in his mid-20s, whereas Ronaldo, De Gea, all of these people are in their 30s, and maybe Erik ten Hag just saw it as they were there to collect a paycheck. Maybe that's what he feels like. We don't know. We obviously have no idea what's going on inside Erik ten Hag's head. All we can do is just bring you stories that we see, and then we can discuss it as a community and try and work out what's going on. But let's move on to the next story, though. Let's talk about the big decision for Jim Ratcliffe. Now, this seems kind of obvious, but I actually think this is probably going to be his biggest decision, probably for quite a long time. It's going to be what players does he look to sell? Because from what I'm hearing this morning, and a lot of you are not going to like this, but, it's a news show. I bring you the news and we discuss it. Apparently, the headline this morning is that Manchester United will need to sell players in the January transfer window in order to bring in players. So there isn't going to be a 50, 100 million pound budget available to us in January. We will have to let people go before money will be able to be spent. So with that in mind, I want you guys to let me know in the comments section what players you think should be sold in the January window. Let me know how much you think would be a fair price for them as well. And if you want to go even further, let me know who do you think would be a realistic club, or give some options. I'll start. So I think Varane should probably go. Let me just say this as well, all right, for context. This is, when you're giving your answers, consider that Erik ten Hag is still the manager in January. Because obviously, if Erik ten Hag isn't the manager, I think this whole question is completely different. So I'll give an answer for both, okay? Let me give you an answer for both. So in this answer here, Erik ten Hag wins his next 8 out of 10 games up until January, and he's still in the job. Jim Ratcliffe comes in. I think at that point he says, right, let's look to sell Varane. Let's look to sell Casemiro. Let's look to sell Donny van de Beek. Maybe they look to sell Mason Greenwood as well to get some money if they do supposedly need money to buy. I mean, if you go through that list there, 20 million for Varane, 40 million for Casemiro, maybe 50, depending on which Saudi clubs come in for him. Donny van de Beek, I'd say maybe like 5 to 10 million. And Mason Greenwood, I don't know how much Mason Greenwood's worth, to be honest. I mean, when he was in his prime, I would have said he was worth more than Antony, but obviously he's not in his prime now. So let's say like 10 to 20 for Mason Greenwood. Overall, there's about £100 million that could be raised there in the January transfer window. Donny van de Beek doesn't even get anywhere near the first team, so he should go. Rafael Varane, if he's fallen out with the manager, then he has to go. Like, he has to. Obviously, Jadon Sancho's another one. I just don't think that we'll get a massive fee for Jadon in January. I think it'll be a loan. So in the January window, if I'm Jim Ratcliffe, my big decision is getting rid of Jadon, Donny, Varane if the relationship can't be resolved, and the same with Casemiro. If the relationship can't be resolved, then they both need to go. We can't have bad eggs, whatever you want to call it, around the dressing room. And then obviously Donny van de Beek needs to go as well, but that's kind of obvious because he isn't really part of any of the team, is he? If Erik ten Hag is gone, i.e. he's been sacked, I would imagine that all of those players will stay, maybe via except for Donny van de Beek. I could see Sancho coming back into the team. I could see Casemiro staying. I could see Varane staying. I honestly think that is the situation here, and I think that is the types of conversations that Jim Ratcliffe, the Glazers, Sir Dave Brailsford, Paul Mitchell, Jean-Claude Blanc, if they all come in, will be having, is that they'll obviously be hoping that Erik ten Hag succeeds, but if he doesn't succeed, it almost makes their job easier, because I'm almost certain that if Erik ten Hag goes, we'll see Jadon Sancho back in a Man United shirt. Whether you think that's right or wrong is up to you, but I just have a feeling that will happen, because yeah, we'll have to wait and see what happens. But let me know in the comment section, guys, who do you think will go in the January window? And also do let me know if you think Erik ten Hag will still be here in January. Let's have a look. Jihan says we should sell Bruno to get some money. I wouldn't sell Bruno personally, but obviously if a massive bid came in, 100 million, I would probably accept it. Somebody says Varane will perform in the next 10 games and get a new contract. Al says, why raise money for desperate signings? The season is over. We aren't getting top 4. Yeah. Bashir says, who could they bring in that would be better than Ten Hag? Mate, they wouldn't bring in anybody. They'd bring in Darren Fletcher and Steve McLaren. That would be the manager until the end of the season. And then they'd spend the next 6 months finding a new manager. And then the process would start again next summer. And it would just be another 2-3 years before, you know, the cycle would just repeat. And that's why I don't want Erik ten Hag to go. That's why I would rather get rid of Casemiro, Varane, get rid of all these players that Sancho, because I don't think those players are the future of Manchester United anyway. I mean, Varane's 31, injury prone. Casemiro's 31, seems to have been a little bit injury prone. Paul says, I don't think we'll win hardly any games up until Christmas. I would agree with you, to be honest, mate. Like, we looked through the fixtures yesterday, didn't we, whilst we were on stream, and the next 3 games are Everton away, very difficult. I know you'll all say, oh, it's Everton, ha ha ha, we should be beating them. Everton away from home at Goodison. We do have a good record there, but it's always a difficult match. It's never easy. And they're going to be really up for it, obviously, after they've just been charged these 10-point deduction for one charge, whereas Man City have got 115 charges and have had nothing at the moment. So they're going to be very up for it. Then obviously you play Galatasaray away. Very difficult game. We've never beaten Galatasaray away from home. Obviously lost to them at home a month or so ago. And then you've got Newcastle away. Those are our next 3 games, 3 away matches. So yeah, it's very, very difficult. Alan says Ten Hag's going to sack himself. Fred says, I agree, Erik ten Hag is losing too many players not to be a problem now. Yeah, the thing is, right, I'll say this now. I think Erik ten Hag will have to perform an absolute miracle to get results in these next 10 matches. Not because he's a bad coach, but just because of how difficult the matches are, you know? For those to be our next 3 games, and then you think, oh, okay, does it get easier after that? I mean, after that, right, you've got Bayern Munich, Liverpool, West Ham, Aston Villa. Those are the next 4 games. Liverpool away, West Ham away. I mean, both of those games I would expect us to lose. Bayern Munich will probably be out of the Champions League by then. Aston Villa at home, like Aston Villa are doing really well. They're above us. They're fifth in the table, and then it's the January window. So when I'm bringing up these types of things, it's not because I want Erik ten Hag out. It's purely because I am worried about these next 10 fixtures. I'm worried that he's fallen out with Varane. He's fallen out with Casemiro, supposedly. Sancho's clearly, well, Sancho's Sancho. He's not playing at all. Like, there's all of these things that are making his job harder for him, Yeah. Al says, are United even allowed to play in the Champions League if Nice are in there as well? I think that story about the Champions League thing has been blown out of proportion, because the thing you have to remember is, right, there are so many clubs in world football that have multi-club ownership. For example, Girona, who are sat top of La Liga at the moment, they're on 35 points at the top of La Liga. They're partly owned by the same owner as Man City. Then you've got Red Bull Salzburg and Red Bull Leipzig. They obviously have been in the same competitions before and have the same owners. There's so many clubs across Europe. I think West Ham are owned partly by, I can't remember who the club was, but at the moment West Ham are obviously in the Europa Conference League, and there's another team in the Europa League. There's another team in the Europa League who have the same owner as West Ham. So yeah, I think this whole story of being banned from Europe has been blown out of proportion. Like, when you actually look at the sources of where this information came from, it was from like the Sun, the Daily Mail. It was more of the tabloid newspapers just going with the headline, United to be banned from Europe. It was quite dramatic. It was quite over the top, and they didn't really explore how all these other clubs are doing it. Why is it only an issue for Manchester United, but not an issue for any of the others, So I imagine it will be okay. But I will say this, from what I'm hearing and from my understanding of the situation, the new rule that UEFA are going to bring in is that multi-club ownership is fine. They'll be able to compete in the same competition, but clubs with the same owner will not be able to sell players to one another. And if they do, then they won't be able to compete in the same competition. So, for example, let me just break this down for you. If Manchester United were to buy Todibo in January, right, and then for some miracle we get in the Champions League and so does Nice, one of us wouldn't be able to appear in the Champions League because we've bought a player from a club that's owned by the same owner. Does that make sense? So I think the rules are about to change, but it will ultimately stop Manchester United going over to Nice, buying Todibo for cheap or buying Thuram for cheap, We won't be able to do that. We won't be able to buy their players. Ishmael says, these players falling out of Erik ten Hag will leave someday and United will remain United, so we need to think for the future. Yeah, I agree with you, mate. I do. That's what I'm trying to say here, Like, Sancho, I think we've spoke about Sancho too much. Let's not talk about that. But Casemiro and Varane are both, 31 years of age. They're both starting to have injury problems. Yes, they're both world-class players, but selling them and replacing them for younger people, regardless of whether they've fallen out of Erik ten Hag or not, I think is a sensible bit of business, because a 31-year-old who can barely play one game a week versus a 21-year-old who could be at the club for the next 10 years, like, I know what I would much rather have. Somebody who can play 3 games a week and develop and grow with us versus somebody who's 31, can barely play 1 game a week and on 350 grand a week. Richie says Ten Hag must give game time to Mainu, Hannibal and other youngsters to see if they're actually good enough going forward. I would agree with that, mate. And I honestly think that will only come if the results start to get really bad. I think Erik ten Hag will then resort back to the youngsters, like he did in that game against Crystal Palace, where we won 3-0. I think, if we really, say we lose against Everton, we lose against Galatasaray and we lose against Newcastle, I imagine then the players, the kind of first team senior players, will probably start to turn on Erik ten Hag. And I think at that point, he'll start to bring in people like Kobe Mainu, Pellistri, Ahmad. Like, he'll have a much younger, youthful team, and you'll see some of the other people kind of being taken out of it. It will be Maguire, Johnny Evans, it'll be those types of people. Right, let's see what else we had planned for the show. We've got a couple minutes left. Everybody who's just joined, please do make sure to smash a like on the video if you haven't already. It really helps to bring more people into the show. So please do smash a like, and please do subscribe, bottom right-hand corner, if you haven't already. Let's have a look. I mean, the only other story that's really kind of out there this morning is that it's saying that John Murtough is now likely to leave Manchester United. So we'll have to wait and see what that one comes out with. Obviously, we're not expecting an announcement this week because it was Thanksgiving yesterday in America. I think the stock market's closed in the USA today. So yeah, we're not going to get any news on the takeover today, and I think even next week might be too soon. So we're just going to have to wait and see what happens. Yeah. But I'm going to wrap the video up here, guys. Thank you so much to everyone who's joined me on the show this morning. I will be back live later this evening, of course, about 6:30 UK time. Please do make sure to smash a like on the video before you go. Please do subscribe to the channel if you are new. This has been Daily Red Devil. I hope everyone has a lovely Friday, whatever you are doing today, and I'll speak to you all later.